You are a market leader operating in a highly competitive industry where efficiency and tangible results are paramount. You have a small and dedicated marketing team focused on executing regular marketing communications that must deliver immediate, measurable outcomes. You need a marketing partner that can seamlessly collaborate with your team, ensuring swift and frictionless execution, all while achieving quantifiable results in real time. My name is Tyler Chisholm, and as the co-founder and CEO of Clear Motive Marketing, we can help. With over 15 years of working with clients exactly like you from across North America, we have the team, the skills, and the processes to deliver the marketing that matters to you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or check out clearmotive.ca to learn more. Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest today, Dr. Michael Mousseau. How are you, Dr. Mike?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to have you on. I think we've got a few rabbit holes we can go down today. Well-being practice leader, behavioral neuroscientist, coach, problem solver, keynote speaker. So you had me at neuroscience right there. I got the nerd in me got sucked in. I think that's how we got introduced. But let's start right off. You're a few weeks in on a new role. You are business development and mental health programs manager at Green Shield Health. So let's talk a little bit about it's a new role. So I know it's something you're excited about. Talk to us a little bit about the role, what you're doing over there, and then let's unpack this amazing concept around neuroscience and making humans better. I'll boldly say that.
Yeah. All right. Well, big task today. So here we go. New role at Green Shield Health. So Green Shield Insurance, I feel like a lot of people might know it. It's an older company in Canada on the insurer side, but really in the past couple of years, what they've done is really invested a lot into technology and innovation to really prop up their health arm. And that's the side of the business that I'm on. So that includes things like your employee family assistance, mental health programs, services, telemedicine, all that kind of fun stuff. And they're putting it under their umbrella. And so I'm in charge of Western Canadian sales for that, but also the future programming and what that looks like for their organization as well. So super exciting role and love it already.
Step one in a new role is being excited and enthusiastic about it and being able to create change. So talk to me a little bit about, obviously feels like it makes sense. This is a trend. We're hearing more about it. We're seeing it in the media. People are talking about it. Thankfully, people are becoming a lot more like, hey, don't just sweep this under the rug. Like, let's find ways. Let's create support. It kind of makes sense that a large national insurer would take that under their wing, but I don't want to downplay that because it still is a whole new initiative and a whole service offering. So just talk to me a little bit about kind of your own journey, because you were at Gallagher before this, the National Physical and Emotional Well-Being Practice Leader. These are big handles you got in your titles here, Mike. They're big titles. So just talk to me a little bit, even kind of what you've seen as an evolution from the business side, and then we'll get into the human component, which I have a sneaky suspicion is why you got into it in the first place.
You know what's interesting? The business side has really evolved. I've been at this for about 6 years out of my PhD now. So I've been kind of tasked with developing a well-being practice at Gallagher before this role at Green Shield, and it's amazing the mindset shift that's happened in a lot of organizations. I think a lot of companies saw this as such a nice to have thing before. Oh yeah, cool. Sounds good. Yeah, do whatever you want, but didn't invest time nor money nor I hate to say it, like kind of talented personnel to it.
Yeah.
And I would say within the last 3 to 4 years, the shift it's been on its head. I think these strategic organizations are, and maybe it took rising costs of disability and maybe it took some actual senior leaders across Canada to be, hey, this is actually hitting my family. This is hitting me, for them to start opening their eyes to this. But you are seeing almost a business imperative shift in organizations who are really starting to take well-being and specifically mental health a lot more seriously.
Interesting. Not to camp out on it because it's kind of done and gone and behind us, but COVID certainly felt like it was a bit of a catalyst to bring this to the forefront. And I choose to find as many positives as I can in what was you look back, you're like, did that actually happen? That was so insane.
Right.
And there was a few positives that did come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is absolutely one of them. I was never busier in my role than I was through those times. And I think from those times, we really saw the importance kind of come out because maybe there was this increased loneliness in maybe some senior executives at some point. Maybe there was this, kind of pressures, these stressors that a lot of people didn't see before in their lives because everything else was going so well. So I do think it was that catalyst that kind of that kick in the butt that people needed to say, hey, this is quite real, and we should probably be taking care of all of our people, including ourselves.
Well, there is a lot of power to feeling something versus looking at stats on something, right? Oh, statistically, if
Exactly.
I invest in this, I'll get a return. And sure, there's been some studies versus like, and I know during COVID, there was a lot of leaders that maybe didn't give themselves the respect or maybe the due or the bandwidth to go, hey, I'm actually also having a terrible time right now.
Yeah.
So I'm so busy, I can't remember, I can't think about how many times I would do a town hall with my team and they would say, well, when's it going to be over? And I'm like, I don't have these superpowers. I can't answer these questions, and you're doing that with large organizations and every single person was like, there's never a time that we were all kind of almost, I heard it said, brought to our knees together. It quickly became divisive down the road, but those first 6 months, it wasn't so much like that. The human element, talk to me about the numbers. Obviously a big part of your role, you work with insurance companies. There's stats for everything. There's actuaries that analyze things. Is this also irrefutable from your perspective to say, no, this isn't a nice to have. This is proven. This is documented. Yes, now we maybe felt it. We all had a shared human experience, but the numbers have already been backing this up for many, many years.
Oh, yeah. It's if you just look at the increase in disability numbers, claims, money, the payouts for these, it is starting to really, really hit the bottom line of a lot of organizations. And, if we take a little zoom out, you said something there, these leaders are kind of realizing it's there, in them as well. And they kind of had to go through it. One thing, so the main statistic out there from, Mental Health Commission, whatever it might be, Statistics Canada, is 1 in 5 people experience mental illness to be diagnosed with. So I do a lot of training of senior leaders within the mental health space, right? So this is why it's important. This is why you need to be thinking about this. And this is what you could do with your people to kind of spot the needs and all that kind of stuff. And when my icebreaker, for lack of a better word, is I go around the room and say, name, where you're born and what's one of your biggest adversities that you went through in your life. And so you go around the room and all of a sudden you have these, and I did a lot in construction industry last year.
Oh, interesting.
Men and we're like,
there are some stereotypes that might exist around that space.
Incredible. The stereotypes are there for a reason in a lot of places.
They're shortcuts. They're not necessarily wrong. I understand what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. But, these people were saying, hey, I had a back injury. So some of them were physical and I was on the couch for 3 months, and then some people would say, hey, my uncle committed suicide, or this happened in my life, or infertility, or whatever it might be. And I say, interesting. So every single one of you in this room deals with something every single day. And in some cases are still dealing with stuff. So now you are a senior leader. Now let's go down a level. Do you think every single person that reports to you is dealing with something every day? Now let's go down a level from there.
Makes it pretty hard to say no at that point. And
exactly.
It's a very well set up situation to go, hey, that whole, like, everyone you deal with is dealing with something and you probably don't have a clue what it is.
Yeah. And hey, do you need to know everything about the situation? No, absolutely not.
The argument would be don't actually still be empathetic, but don't get into the details.
Right. But
leave everyone with that respect and dignity that I believe you that you're having a hard time. What can I do for you? And stop there.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And I think that's the realization. And there's a lot of light bulb moments that happen when I start that conversation that way and create a safe space with these people to start discussing about other issues. Or they, hey, I never actually thought that this could have been a problem too. Now, instead of the 1 in 5 statistic, which when you hear 1 in 5, what do you think right away? Well, not me.
Yeah, no, that's like for sure. That's absolutely. That's the minority. But I also heard you say specifically diagnosed with some type of mental health versus I'm dealing with something, it's undiagnosed, it's unsupported, I suffer alone. Like those numbers are way higher. It's probably like 4 and 5. Back to your point. It's everybody. Back to your point of the example.
Right. And so that's, I think, the level set we need to make. And can we get through a lot of these things? Of course we can. Right. But that's the humanistic element of it. That's the proactivity behind it. right? That's the stuff we need to start focusing on.
Long before we ever go, I have program A, B, C, or D that you might want to purchase for your organization. If we don't believe it, we don't think about it. And I see it on your LinkedIn, and I see it.
Yep.
Psychological safety. If you don't create that in your environment, all the programs in the world are not going to quote unquote solve we signed up for a program, so therefore the problem is solved. Yeah. You don't put in a quarter and get a gumball at the bottom, or maybe $1. I don't know. Gumballs aren't a quarter. Gumballs aren't a quarter.
I probably should tread carefully because my company is the one, I'm trying to put services in the hands of a lot of other people. But in the same sense, I say this all the time in my trainings with organizations. And when I'm trying to kind of implement these programs, I don't want them to sit on the shelf at your organization, right? Stop throwing these kind of benefits at your people when really it's kind of the workplace itself that might be causing them to use these. Like,
right.
let's
100%.
Right? Or the top 5 stressors in a person's life is from the workplace. So if we, in my opinion, can we get rid of stress? No, of course not. Right? We evolved as a human species because of stress. So we can mitigate some of it. If we look in the mirror a bit as a company and organization, say, well, what are we doing that's making them use these benefits?
That's a lot of accountability and a lot of ownership, which I completely agree with you. Change doesn't happen without it. But in a world of we're busy, we're slammed, we don't have time, which again also is the part of the challenge. If we just had time to take the time, it would be such a good thing. It would be great if we had the time, and these things get shelved. So, and I do believe, and I give everyone the benefit of the doubt from like, well, it was a good intention that we brought this on. But what I'm hearing you say, you can't look at, it's not a checkbox exercise. It is a holistic approach and it's a bigger conversation.
Exactly. Right. And it'll be seen through as well. If it is a
checkbox. That's that. Oh, we did the thing. We don't have to do that. Like we checked that. We don't have to do that again. From a neuroscientist, like a neuroscience perspective, talk to me a little bit about kind of getting into this. When you were going through doing your PhD, was this the path? Or did the path evolve? And I'm just really curious because sometimes I look at like, oh, neuroscience, cool degree. What do you do with that exactly, Mike? Or maybe now I sound like maybe I sound like your relatives going, oh, interesting. So what does that mean?
Well, I'll tell you this. A good mentor of mine in the insurance field, and she told me once, nobody goes to school for what we do. Nobody goes through undergrad, high school. I'm going to go to the insurance world.
Right on. Yep.
To be honest,
I kind of wondered that, but I thought I would ask it in maybe a polite way.
I didn't know this field of work existed until about a year left in my PhD. And so I was going through my PhD. My PhD was more specifically on pain, opiates, kind of addictions within that arena, more so than just specifically what I'm doing today.
Okay. That in itself is a whole other podcast, maybe 5 or 6 podcast episodes.
Maybe we can, yeah. I have to brush that off though. There's a lot of cobwebs up here.
Yeah, I'm sure, but that as an epidemic, a problem of epidemic proportions.
No, but in that sense, what I realized in the academic world, this wasn't for me. I didn't want to spend my life kind of writing grants, kind of making maybe these smaller discoveries that could lead to amazing discoveries down the road. And don't get me wrong, the hazard spot for academic world does. But for myself, I found it way more impactful and way more purposeful for me to extend some of this knowledge that I've kind of grown in the PhD world into the business world, which a lot of people don't do. And I think there's so many transferable skills from the PhD that I had into this business world, but it was very much so a process of what do I do with this?
Yeah, right? I can imagine. Yeah. But then you've also got a wave of companies and, as humans where all of a sudden this became a lot more front and center than it was even when you were in the depths of your PhD program.
It did, but it took me a lot of convincing to get an organization to take a chance on me, to be honest with you.
I appreciate that.
The former CEO at Gallagher, Melanie Junot, she was the one that took the chance on me. And I am forever grateful
That's
And I
great.
still remember what she said to me. We had coffee. I connected with probably 20 people around Calgary trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And we had a coffee together, and she said, "You know what? I have no idea what I'm going to do with a neuroscientist, but I know I want one." So,
As a leader, I love that. Like, I don't like, you're awesome. This is awesome. I don't know where it's going to go, but we're going to figure it out together. Let's
yeah,
do it. That, which is amazing.
and we truly did. I
Oh, five and
started
a
as
half
an
years. That's it. Yeah. Those are little chunks of
yeah.
lifetimes right in there. So when you think about these programs that you're putting together from the average individual listening, who's maybe a little more nerdy or wants to dig in a little bit,
Okay.
if I think about a program that might be sold or delivered as an offering through an insurance program, where does the neuroscience come in? Is it the way it's designed? Is it understanding how we function and work as humans to be influenced positively? Like, just talk to me about the interrelationship between here's a program and here's the neuroscience layer that most of us will never even realize is there, right?
Okay. So I like to take a holistic view on this.
Okay.
So the way I look at this, specifically at the company that I'm at now, at Green Shield,
Okay.
we have all the services from front to back. And from
Okay.
what I mean from front to back is on the right side here, you're in crisis, right? So this is where your EAP supports come in. This is where oh my gosh, my world's upside down, right? I need help right now. Perfect. We got it. But that's not where everybody is. That's like 10% of people, maybe,
Okay. Yep.
right? If
Well,
that,
there'll be a bell curve, right? And we're talking about the extreme ends of the curve, right?
exact, but I mean, it's not totally bell curve because
Okay.
I think a lot of us are kind of over here in the preventative stage,
Okay.
right? We're trying to grow our resiliency.
But
So
sometimes we're one major incident away from being on the other side.
we are very close, right?
Okay.
And so if you
Yeah.
look at the mental health continuum,
Yeah. So
take a look at
not
it
a bell
yourself.
curve in that sense. I appreciate that.
Yep. But, it flips day to day and it's not binary.
Yeah.
That's key to remember. But a lot of us are in the preventative side. And so this is where a lot of the neuroscience comes into play. This is where, we're developing training and development programs for employees who, there is so much information out there, right? Just Google well-being, right? Like,
Yes.
good
And then
luck
go
getting
ask
through that web.
ChatGPT, and then go ask Perplexity, and then go ask Gemini. Yeah, absolutely. And then
Exactly.
go ask your opinionated friend, and then just see how much misinformation conflicting, crisscrossing information you get.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And so what I like to do in these situations is, in my opinion, we can be a lot more preventative with coping skills, with stressors, with a whole bunch of different things in our lives, right? But these are ultimately all behavioral changes. And so changing a behavior, any sort of change, is difficult, right? Humans, we don't like change. So what I like to do is, if you want to make a change in your life, right? Let's say you have a coach, for instance, and the coach is like, you need to do this. When that coach is potentially telling you need to do something, that actually has the opposite effect on a lot of people. They put up these guards and say, whoa, what's wrong with the way I do things?
Mike, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. So
Ultimately,
far,
though,
this all checks out.
right? But what I like to do, and a lot of what I like in the preventative side of the arena and using a lot of neuroscientist concepts is, can I teach Tyler maybe how to fish a little bit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the sense of, hey, Tyler, so this is what's going on in your brain. This is why you don't like change. This is, this is how dopamine works, and this is how motivation works, right? Think of this what you will. But if you understand some of these neuroscience concepts on a very basic level, maybe you can start to understand and arm yourself with what's going to make the change appropriate for you. So if you want to change a behavior in a person, you have to make it their idea. It can't be yours. And so that's the neuroscience kind of angle I like to take in a lot of the preventative training, development, programs, all that kind of amazing stuff that we're building on the site is, arming people the why. That's probably my, talking a little bit about the pandemic earlier, that was probably my biggest pet peeve in the entire pandemic, though. How many webinars and news things that popped up and was like, Tyler, you got to go for a walk. You got to eat better. You got to, and just people telling us to do
Sounds like
things.
it sounds like a lot of you shoulds, right? And
Yeah,
nobody likes being. What I heard that they don't should all over me.
right. And but
Yeah.
nobody said why. Well, Tyler, why is that walk good for you? Right, Tyler, why is
That
eating?
feeling you get, let me explain where it's coming from. So then now you know, and now it's up to you to get more or not. It's up to you now.
Yeah. Do you want to
Interesting.
feel this way, right? Do
So what
you
I'm really
want to?
hearing is on that
You get
preventative
hyper.
side, which the crisis side, we have mechanisms in place, we have support, and we're getting better at that.
There.
What I'm really hearing is where the neuroscience is playing in is that other quadrant or portion of
Hmm.
individuals that are like, yeah, no, I get it, but I need more information, which is really about empowerment and taking matters into your own hands. Because, like you
Yeah.
said, that's the only way to truly create change.
And then you have the meaty middle too, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the where these people, maybe some people are reacting, they're not at their best. It's probably where a decent amount of people probably sit. So how do we get their minds to realize they're not at their best and push them left on this curve toward preventative instead of falling into that trap of crisis? And that's kind of the difference of what the Green Shield Health and where I'm going in my career with,
Mm-hmm.
because of this innovative lens, is we're trying to create this kind of journey and this connection to all of these, understanding people jump on this kind of continuum day to day. But
Yep.
what is the appropriate kind of service support for you at that time?
And
So
I'm
I think,
assuming this is a combination of technology. I can have a
yeah,
wearable that can tell me where my body battery's at or my stress
absolutely.
level and all the different things. But also I might need to talk to somebody or, I want another point of view. It feels like it's all jammed in there in different points
Exactly.
we've never had more access to data, but what do I do? Okay. My buddy wears his thing and he always tells me his body battery. I'm like, well, what are you doing differently now? Oh, sometimes I'll sleep more. Maybe my eating wasn't good, or I can tell that I'm stressed. And it's nice to have all this data, but you still have to know what to do with it, right?
Yeah. And so to be honest with you, I don't track a lot of this stuff
Okay.
because I'm ultimately on the other side of that argument, of maybe probably your side of that argument. So what?
I have
Right?
purposely avoided some of that stuff because I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm going to get really committed to something that isn't actually like, what role is it actually playing besides getting hyperfixation? So I've actually chosen to stay
exactly.
away from it because I
Yeah,
could see myself going down that road.
yeah. And a lot of, and this kind of goes back earlier to the well-being side of our conversation a little bit more, is too many programs at organizations were a little bit too focused on the 10 to 20% of people who really, honestly, Tyler, don't need the help.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
gonna run. They're gonna do this stuff, right? And great, you need to somehow connect with that 20% on the other side of the curve that really need the help. But when you're in that state of when you really need the help is ultimately the time where you shut down and you pull back too often
Yeah, it's when you're the least
from these
receptive. Yeah,
support.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So that's what we
When
need to
things are
hit.
the darkest, or that's when you tend to turtle or tend to be a little bit more.
Exactly.
You can take more of an isolating approach. Are you seeing trends with and not to call it anyone on the negative, but I always love calling out the positive. Any organizations, verticals? Is there any areas, even size of organizations, like where are you seeing this get more traction versus less traction? And again, speaking very broadly, we don't have to name names, but
Yeah.
if
No,
there's
no, I
anybody
won't.
that also deserves a high five, you can give them a positive shout out as well.
You know what I said this a little bit off the top today. So, last year, I spent a very solid chunk of time in the construction
Construction
industry.
space, yeah, yeah, which feels a bit like an outlier, but apparently not.
And it's I think, and maybe I'm painting a picture here, but I mean, this is in a couple of years worth of, I didn't mind the data per se, but
No,
it's
yeah, this is
kind of
you're
my
sharing personal experience, so
anecdotal.
someone can disagree, but that was legitimately your personal
Yeah,
experience.
but it was a lot in the construction field, and what I found was, yes, the stigma is there, of course, and like the stereotypes are there, but you get in the room with these people, they genuinely care. And I think that might be missing within the stigma or the stereotype per se. And I think they want to learn. And I feel like they haven't had a leader in their past that was
Interesting, yeah.
accepting of this. Or, there's a lot of rub some dirt on it, you're fine. And there still is. Like, don't,
Yeah.
there still absolutely is. But these people want to now make a difference. They're seeing it. Maybe they have kids. Maybe they have this kind of stuff that's affecting their life. And
Yeah,
they are
they might have it might be an industry that's also struggling and like, hey, if this was working, we wouldn't have problems getting people. We wouldn't have problems keeping people.
it's
Like there is a point also where you're like, hey, gang, think what we may, think what we might. This isn't working, and we need to change
well,
something. And I do appreciate it. Sometimes has to get bad before it gets better, right?
there's I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but there is a striking, I want to say it's at least 30%, might be upwards of 40% of the suicides in Canada a year are from the construction industry.
Oh wow, I've never heard that.
Yeah.
That's a crazy high number for
And
to have that be what the number of thing. Wow. Whew.
so
Huh.
it's quite striking, and it's something that we need to kind of focus on. So it's great that they are. And what I find is these people are a little bit naive to a lot of this stuff. Tell me more. I've never heard this,
So
right?
there's just there's a curiosity there that might not. Well, yeah,
Exactly.
I've heard this before. There's a difference between hearing it before and needing to take it seriously versus like I've never even heard this. Like
Yep.
you're actually blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. And so that's
From an educator and a facilitator, that's a fun group to be because if they're receptive and curious, like can you really ask for anything better for an audience, right?
exactly. And they're asking questions. They're pulling me aside, telling stories, this and that. Where if I go a little bit of the white collar way, which I've done quite a bit
Yeah.
of as well, lots of training, lots of facilitation, lots of that kind of stuff. Still, you get a lot of good questions. You get a lot of this. I find though that these people maybe they're a little bit more well read.
Yeah.
Maybe they have some passions within certain fields. So instead of being that full curiosity, they're waiting for something that maybe not to trip up per se, but to say, you know what I mean? Like,
They're
oh, that's
listening with
not
a
what I
different ear.
read.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
You know
That's
what I mean?
yeah,
So
I do.
it's
I do. That's interesting. Anyone who's presented, facilitated, run a meeting, you've run into all versions of them. Like,
yeah,
oh, you're just waiting to get me here, versus like that audience that they're like, they might have the arms crossed at the beginning, but once they uncross, and that's an overgeneralization, but it's an easy one. What have you got to teach me? Oh wow, I a lot. I'm curious. I want more. And those are can be very rewarding as well. And I think it
yeah,
gives me a sense of optimism to hear you talk
right.
about the field of construction, which could easily stereotypically just be put in the negative bucket.
Isn't it? That's exactly how I
Oh,
feel.
that's cool. Actually, that's great.
The sense of optimism is, I really do think we're going the right direction here. And I don't know if I could have said that when I first started in this industry 5 years ago, 6 years ago, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I was doors were not open.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool idea. No. Cool. Oh yeah. Interesting. Not for us. Are
Oh,
you
yeah.
seeing like going back, putting your researcher hat on when I talk about,
Okay.
just neuroscience as a concept and you hear it more and more, it's becoming more mainstream. It shows up in different places. What I'm hearing, and again, I'll propose something and tell me if I'm about to lunch on it, is that this isn't about new breakthrough neuroscience tech or beliefs or academia. It's actually taking what we already know and bringing it to bear in a space that maybe this just hasn't been the way we looked at things before. Or is there a balance in the middle of that?
Good question. I'm not sure I've thought of it in this way. I think the core concepts are there and have been there for quite a long time.
Right.
There's nothing revolutionary happening. Not nothing. Of course there is.
Some of your fellow
But
researchers might
yeah,
want to disagree with you, but I know that's not what you meant.
I'm gonna get attacked from the academic world after
Yeah,
this.
well, at
So
least that way we know they're listening. So that's a good
yeah,
test.
yeah, it's fine.
Mike, remember when you said this at minute 27:52? We aggressively disagree with you.
The the field of psychology, the field of CBT, cognitive behavioral
Yeah.
therapy, the techniques, what they're using for these people that need it changed
Right.
significantly. Uh, what I do think, and you said it a little bit earlier, let's focus on the positive, right? There's this whole new revolutionary field though of happiness, positive
Mm.
psychology, and again, it's not new per se, but it's really coming to the forefront right now. And so the concepts of care haven't changed too much, but the way we are approaching it is changing a little bit, in my opinion. I think a
Okay.
lot of companies are going more towards like positivity, this kind of stuff. Um, so that's kind of my on the fence answer. of
No,
this.
I appreciate it. And because my thinking was, yeah, there's lots of breakthrough research happening, but like you
Of
said, it's
course.
small little nuances and cool
Yeah.
ideas and breakthroughs that maybe in 10 years might cycle their way through versus, hey, there's a body of knowledge and understanding that maybe just hasn't got the light of day in this way. And why you're seeing, you moving over to Green Shield to take on a new opportunity because they're like,
Yeah.
hey, we've already got so many things in place, but we know there's more to offer. You
Yeah.
probably didn't have to go and develop some breakthrough neuroscience techniques. You just took the ones that were already proven and tested, which is, again, creates more trust ultimately. Like, this isn't a harebrained scheme. This is proven and it's been used over here. Let's bring it in. I love when like things that are very valid in some sectors and almost considered been around for a while can still be brand new somewhere else. And to me,
Yeah.
that's where there's a lot of opportunity because you come with instant credibility.
Yeah. I think that's the one place that we're really going to see some pretty interesting stuff over the next few years is in the field of psychological safety.
Mm.
And I think that's where a lot of this, what you're saying, is a lot of these neuroscience concepts are going to come in. Maybe positive psychology,
Yeah.
maybe some of the psychological counseling will come in. There's going to be employee experience tapped into that. It's really going to be a really interesting bucket to explore and follow for the next little bit here, because I think a lot of companies are realizing what a profound impact it can have. And,
Yeah,
and the
it's
research is quite unequivocal as well in this, that, think about your own situations and your own time in your careers, right? When you had a boss or an organization that you truly felt safe and good in, your productivity just flies through that roof. You want to do anything for that company, and I just think there's a lot there.
So hearing you say
Yeah,
that, because psychological safety, the term is becoming mainstream,
yeah,
but I still think it has a lot to be understood. So if I
couldn't
was going
agree
to
more.
timeline that, sounds like we're kind of in the first quarter or maybe even earlier in the gameplay of where this is going to go. And I really like what you said about the neuroscience techniques and understandings and like very clear like science around that is going to start to show up to make psychological safety more true, deeper ingrained, and actually more
Yeah,
just the point that we can stop talking about it because it's just how we operate. Like it becomes unconsciously competent. We're just this way, but no one has to call it out for us to be
yeah,
that way. But that's
yeah,
a journey. That's a journey. We're in the unconsciously? We realize we're not as good at as we need to be. That's the most awkward phase
yeah.
of the cycle, in my experience.
Yeah, it's yeah, I would agree. It is interesting though if you start to date back um, from a scientific lens, and maybe this is the PhD in me.
Yeah.
I always like to think of what's the history of that. Why did this come about? Where did this come from? Right, and this obviously Amy Edmondson is probably the
It's hard to talk
again
about it without that name coming up
I don't want to
100%.
be attacked by her, but I like to call her like kind of the godmother of psychological safety in a sense, and hopefully she takes that in a positive and not negative, because she truly is, right? But that her really the concepts of this started in 1999. Like we're 25 years out of that, right? So these aren't new concepts. Then you have Project Aristotle. I think that was in 2012.
Mm.
Google did a massive study of what makes an effective team. Number one thing that came out was psychological safety.
Yeah, I'm just I'm Googling while we're chatting, and yeah, even Google got on board in 2014,
Yeah,
just literally as you said that. That's
2014.
where I
Okay,
see.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
and
Project
so
Arts with a massive organizations studied 180 of its own teams for a period of 3
yeah,
years.
yeah,
They identified
and
psychological safety as defining characteristic of its most high performing teams. Hard to argue
there
with
it is.
that right there.
It is, and so that's that. But that's again, so 2014, 10 years ago. But how did? But it's kind of the reality behind this is how do we create action around this?
Mm.
That is not just, hey, Tyler, I'm going to come to your organization and train your people on psychological safety, then leave.
Yeah, check that box.
Exactly, right. And is training needed? Yes, absolutely. But it's almost like we're developing a generation of new leaders coming up that
Mm.
are gonna potentially be the change that we're gonna want to see, right? And it's not like we can't change the current leaders, but there is that sense of, well, this is how we kind of did it around here, and
And
this
back to your
maybe
point
this
about
new
change,
generation is
it,
going to be developed.
100%. Such an example. We have one of our long-term clients. We've been working with them for 12 years, and every 3 years, just by their culture, they cycle out their leaders. So we've been consistent, but we receive a new leader of our division, and we're a service company. We're marketing, so we'll get a new marketing lead every 3 years. it is the biggest opportunity for us to change how we deliver services to them. Because otherwise, you can change it, but it's degrees. Like for all of a sudden, we had a new leader come in. He's like, I'm open. I want to see this. I want to see how we do workflow. I want to see new creative. And I said to the team, like taking full advantage of, there was a changing of the guard and there's a different human now that is our point of contact. There is no single bigger opportunity to shift how we work with them. And that's after 12 years of where they're pretty safe. They're very, steeped in this is how we do things, but you change a leader and all of a sudden all bets are off and the door's open. They're still who they are. Like, let's be clear, it's not a wholesale change, but those day-to-day things that sometimes are very hard to get moved forward, no matter how many meetings you have, new leader, everything's up for grabs. And we just went through one of those and it's been exciting because the last leader was good. The new leader is open, but it's on top of the good that was already created. So it's staging out in 3-year cycles. Yeah. It's fun to watch it. And although as an individual who likes things to change overnight, I also know that's not typically how it works.
Of course, right? But this is how innovation happens. This is how change happens.
Slowly and then all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, and that's what we need. We need to be able to have a place where we can push each other, question each other, and I think that's where this world's going. And hopefully we can do it in a cordial way. And that
not be shitty about it. Yeah. And first rule of life, don't be an asshole. Anyway, so that's one of my philosophies. I've worked on it. I don't always accept. Yeah. Sometimes I slip, but I always go, I wasn't living up to. So what I heard you also loud and clear is the real requirement for this, above all, is a curiosity and openness, wow, like how could this benefit us versus, I've heard this story before. Talking about speaking to some of the construction professionals that you've had a chance to interact with versus potentially, and stereotypically so, white collar, where this has been floating around for, since 2014, people would have seen that study with Google. I still would argue that level of openness and creativity and just curiosity to know what it could look like differently, when that slips away, as leaders, we're in trouble. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah. And that probably goes back to the mechanism of being human and not liking change. Right. So
fair enough.
We're in this kind of weird, I guess, cycle. But I think it's, if we want to grow, we want to develop ourselves, and we just need to be more accepting of some of these ideas and some of these ways of working as well. Right. So
if you were going to get a leadership team, like if someone's listening to this, I always love to give people like, oh, I'm curious, that's why I do this podcast. I'm curious about this concept. Okay. What do I do now? Is it bring in somebody to get some education? Is like, yeah, we already know about this, but yeah, you're right. I'm listening. I want to curious, like what's some of the formula for some of the companies that you've gone in with where you've seen them like, yeah, the leadership team got on board, then they rolled it out and then they followed up and they didn't let it sit on the vine. They kept pushing it forward.
Yep.
What's kind of that adoption to buy into running with it and having it successful? What have you seen really work out from maybe a little miniature playbook kind of perspective?
Well, step one is, this is not a grassroots, initiative, I guess we'll call it, for lack of a better word. A lot of times, a lot of mental health programs, a lot of well-being specifically programs are grassroots up. This group of runners and people who are in, they try to come up through the organization and kind of beat the drum to the senior leadership, like, hey, look what we're doing. This has to be a buy-in at the executive and even board level. Okay. That your people's health, their mental health, their state of well-being, and the psychological safety within our organization is an imperative of how we're moving forward and maybe a core pillar. And that, what I've seen is step one, but it's a long step, right? Because again, back to checking boxes, of course you're going to go around a boardroom and be like, yeah, of course. Yeah, let's do it. Make sure everybody's good. Okay, great. That's step one. Now, the long step of step one is, how are you going to walk the talk? And I think that's the change level that we need to start seeing. And I think that's the one that's skipped. You get the board, you get the executives, you get the videos being like, we're going to be a healthy company. And then they're not walking the talk.
It gets delegated down the train.
Down. But they're still being the same as what they've always been. They're still being potentially psychologically unsafe. Maybe they're not having safe environments to have, conversations. They're not doing the main levels of psychological safety. It's just being delegated to a team, and we're kind of being up here. And I'm generalizing, of
Of
course, but
course,
this
but I
is
think
what I
about
see a lot.
it's leading by example isn't the best way. It's the only way, right? Or yeah.
And so that's step one.
Yep.
And I think step two in this piece is, really taking a look at what is kind of the main stressors in our organization, and can we eliminate some of them, right? So like scheduling,
What are we
things
doing that
like,
makes this worse?
yeah, like, is there a way we could just tweak this a bit? I did a survey with this company recently, and um, I don't want to out them, so I'm going to change it a
Yep,
little
no,
bit here.
I
But
appreciate that. Yep, yep.
basically, they were getting paid at certain intervals. So let's call it like these employees were getting paid once a month, for instance. Okay, um, and everything was great at this organization. The survey was fine, everything like this. There wasn't too much, but then in the comments, I kind of started seeing a lot of, could we get paid every 2 weeks to relieve some pressures and stuff? And it wasn't exactly this time frame, but and these people were just kind of gobsmacked, like, oh, we never even knew this was an issue. It was such a minor tweak.
Yeah.
Now these people have a little bit more financial freedom, maybe flexibility, I'll
Yep.
say it, not freedom, and now they can do this, do that, and they heard the employees and now are actioning it. So walking the talk and then understanding the true stressors in your workplace. And
Removing friction. Removing friction.
exactly. And then create an action plan that's involving your employees. If they're the ones that are going to change, right, back to behavioral change, you can't just be dispelling them on them and saying, change this. It just doesn't work. That's where many change initiatives kind of go to die. We have to tell them why. Why are we changing this? And we need your involvement.
Well, and often there's nobody better to tell you what needs to be changed than the people that are dealing with the thing, right? That's where it kind of works its way. I've had lots of leaders on just talking about digital transformation and how they kind of, in their words, blew it because they tried to top down it. They tried to just like, you're going to do it this way, and nobody did it that way. And nor was the thing that they thought was the things they were trying to fix weren't actually the things that were causing the problem for the individuals, which they were in turn the most motivated to change, just in terms of how they entered an invoice. Or like you said, when you boiled it down, it was actually kind of small things. But it was like, oh my God, like if I could just enter my expenses. I was at a roundtable dinner around digital transformation. It was big multinationals in the room. And they had some of their IT leaders there that were talking about some of the initial changes they made around, digitization, using automation. And what blew me away was how small each initiative was. Like just entering expense reports, how they automated a portion of the approval process and saved like 1,000 hours a month across the year. Like it was crazy, the number. And it was like, it's so easy to look at these things and go, oh, it's got to be massive to make a difference. And that's often actually not the case.
No.
It's the small thing that's
not.
like, oh, you made my life so much better. Thank you. I hated that task. It was so annoying.
Yeah. And on that point, right? So we're talking about the top down, it only works to a point. And this is why I like to call what my model that I like to use at organization a sandwich model, because you're top down, leading by example, doing all this. Now you need the bottom up. And you need them to meet at the meaty middle. And I think that's the way that I see the best success in these organizations.
Is there a sweet spot in size? Because if we're really big, there's a lot of bread between the meat, or whatever metaphor we're going to use. Smaller organizations, and small could be 500, large could be 5,000, just for the sake of numbers, all subjective. How far the leadership team is and how far they're disconnected, like how tall is the ivory tower? I'm assuming that part of the culture plays a big part when it gets into the nuts and bolts of executing on some of these initiatives.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the challenges at different sizes, for sure. Just like anything, too small, it's tougher to track some of these changes over a longer term. Too big, it's you run into silly things like they have a really strong IT department that won't give out data for you to track any of these things, or it's tough to get the right players in the room.
Yeah.
And so that I think there's, but every organization can do something, and I am positive of that. Right? Do they need to do a full, $250,000 consulting project to understand the root causes, all this of psychological safety in their organization at 50 employees? Probably not. but
I would
you
argue that deep down, everybody already knows what the problem is and where it's coming from. I would guess,
so,
in my personal experience, limited but personal.
so then is there a way that we could just maybe design a couple focus groups, ask some people, and then create some actionable change on that? Yeah, that's not a big project. And I say this all the time. A lot of this comes down to kind of career development as well, right? This is one thing that a lot of so there's a really interesting study. I can't off the top of my head. I'm not sure where it's from, but they looked at the different areas of well-being. So you got career, physical, emotional, financial well-being. Okay, let's call it the top four. And they asked, like, what's the most important one? And it turns out career well-being, if you have high career well-being, so you're being developed, you have a purposeful job, you have all this, you're twice as likely to have higher well-being in the other areas.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
So can we take advantage of that?
Well, we spend a lot of time there doing a lot of things there. It's a big
yeah.
portion of our lives for sure.
Yeah. So, and could you kind of develop this culture? Can you have some development opportunities? Can you create leadership programs and development programs that really support the career well-being, which ultimately links into their emotional, physical, and potentially financial as well?
But ultimately reduces downtime, reduces stress leave, reduces all the things we started talking about are the challenges that it's easy to point to, like, hey, when it's not going well, these are the actual like hard numbers, financial impact to the organization that's in a highly competitive world. That's it. That puts us at a disadvantage as organizations. Like, it's kind of like, ignore it at your peril, right? To be dramatic, but true.
There's, I think the numbers are starting to, people just leave, right? Organizations.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's turnover numbers are astounding right now. But then there's other kind of pieces to this as well, disability and all this. But there was a study. This is a pre-pandemic study, so I would love to see this study again. But from 2014 to 2019, so 5-year time span in Canada, okay, there was a 700% increase in damages to organizations from employees saying, hey, you organization are the one that caused this psychological injury.
That's a
where are those today?
I don't think that number probably went down during the past five. If we cycle back 5 years from the other side, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
And
I feel like there's so much we could unpack. Just like, okay, tell like what about it and what things and what showed up, and just the sheer trend in a negative direction of which is, as a leader, as someone who owns an organization, like you have to take that responsibility very, very seriously, and you should, and you need to. Mm-hmm. It's easy to get frustrated by it and overwhelmed by it, but it's part of the gig.
But that's the positive to all this. Is it's starting to be.
Yeah.
People are really seeing the value of these programs, these integrated programs, these strategic programs, and really what they could do to support their people. They're not just there on the shelf anymore. They're truly integrated.
The dusty binder, like we did a program, it was in a binder, we stuck it on the shelf and never looked at it, right? I'm dating myself like that, but anyone who's been in corporate long enough, there's a broom full of binders of things you paid to have implemented that no one ever looked at again.
Exactly.
And now it's on some imaginary folder on the cloud. So same. It's, last time this folder was accessed 3 years ago. Okay. I guess no one's using this information that we spent all this money with the consulting company to analyze. So like anything, leading by example, getting out there and taking that initiative. But I love the sandwich concept of like only to a point, then it has to come up and you have to meet and you have to meet in the middle. And I think that's very, very true in all levels of kind of change management.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Mike, I feel we could kind of pause here, which I think is a good stop, or we could launch into a series of other, like, I love your passion for it. And I love what I did here was, not to minimize it, but just a compliment, a very practical, pragmatic approach from the neuroscientist PhD to like, okay, how does this show up in the real world and how do I actually create change? Which certainly feels like you found your formula.
Yeah. And that's what it's about, right? I have this passion to bring these concepts to the masses, and I really think that's happening a little bit, and I'm going to keep following that. And these, as crazy as these concepts could be in the neuroscience field, they're really not. They are approachable, and so let's use them to our advantage in the business world, right?
I love it. I think it's an old Wayne Dyer quote. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So I'm hearing
Yeah,
that through and through the thread of everything from the beginning of our conversation, even to now. But hey, if
perfect.
someone wants to get a hold of you, is it LinkedIn or like
Yeah,
where do I find Dr. Mike?
Dr. Mike Mousseau on LinkedIn would be
Amazing.
your easiest way for sure. And yeah, would love to chat. I love chatting about this stuff. So
You
whether it
made it
be
we
about,
just blew through 50 minutes like a blink of an eye.
yeah,
So
I
no, very,
didn't even
I
know.
feel like we only scratched the surface.
Yeah, perfect.
Dr. Mike, thanks for coming on, man. Thanks for the work you do. And thanks for taking the time just to share a little window into this world with my audience. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Anytime. Thank you.